Hey guys, so I'm on my notes here. Welcome to Wednesday, and we're going to talk about some different hearts today. And I'll have you guys get on a Jamboard too and kind of discuss the differences and similarities on that. So here's just a little bit of review from the past few days. So blood of your heart, I guess. Blood always enters your atrium first. So if you remember yesterday, we talked about the different chambers of the heart. And the atrium is the top chamber. And just so you know that, and this is again a starred one, so it's important to know these, the left atrium and the right atrium. That's where the blood goes into the heart. It always goes into the top before the bottom. Blood always leaves the heart from a ventricle, and the ventricles are the bottom two chambers. So there is a right ventricle and a left ventricle. So we went over slide 27 right here and talked about veins, arteries, and capillaries. So blood is carried away from the heart in something called an artery. And this is the biggest artery right here, this red one. It's called the aorta. Okay, and blood is always carried to the heart in a vein, and veins are usually labeled blue. They aren't blue or red in real life, but we usually kind of label them that way. And then you have these tiny, tiny, tiny blood vessels. You can see this on slide 23. These are found in your skin, in your digestive tract, in your, anywhere inside of your muscles, in your brain. They deliver blood to the cells. These little tiny blood vessels are called capillaries, and this is where diffusion of oxygen and CO2 and other nutrients and sugars and water and things like that happen. So very, 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 very tiny branches are called capillaries. So this slide 29, is kind of review from yesterday's stuff. Now, slide 30, 31, and 32 are kind of the ones that we're going to focus on today, and they're on some different animals. And I'll start us off with slide 30, and just keep in mind that the human heart is similar, and just kind of keep its structure in mind with its four chambers. So this is a fish. And this happens to be a tuna. And if you look at a tuna's heart, it's located right here. It has an atrium and a ventricle. A fish has a two-chambered heart. So, I mean, I could write that in the notes or something. I think that would be good to have. But so you're going to write in here, two-chambered heart, right? It's got one atrium and one ventricle. Now, here's the thing with a two-chambered heart. The blood comes in from the body, so it's all used up through a vein, and it goes into the atrium. Remember, blood always enters the atriums first. It gets pumped through a valve into the ventricle. From there, the ventricle squeezes and blood is forced to the gills. And in the gills, it picks up oxygen and turns red in our diagram here. And then from there, the blood is forced through another heartbeat to the body. And everywhere in the body, it goes to little capillaries. Capillaries exchange the blood. They exchange oxygen in the blood. They get CO2 again. And it just circulates back around into the atrium again to do the whole loop again. Okay? These are known as closed circulatory systems. They're closed. All the pipes are closed. A leaky pipe or a leaky blood vessel would be bad. If it was inside of the body, you would have bruising. If it's outside of the body, if it's open to the outside, you have bleeding, a cut, right? So all of our blood vessels are closed in a series of pipes. So why not just have a two-chambered heart? What's wrong with this? Well, it works pretty good. We get oxygen-rich blood going out to the body, which is awesome. But if you notice that the heart is generally oxygen poor, it gets oxygen poor blood. So the heart doesn't work very efficiently. So there's a little bit of a problem with that. So then the next step would be to let's add another little chamber and see what happens. And we're going to look at a frog for that. So a frog has added a chamber. It has a ventricle, or sorry, an atrium, the right atrium. It has a ventricle, and now it has a left atrium. So we have a three-chambered heart. We've added an additional heart. And these diagrams are maybe a little bit easier to understand, but blood comes in, it's oxygen poor from the body, just like it did in the fish, and just like it does for a human, and it goes into the right atrium. And then from there, it's forced into the ventricle. Now here's the thing, this ventricle is open, okay, so blood can come in from the other side too. That's why it's purple. Here, oxygen poor blood from the body mixes with oxygen-rich blood that was coming from the lungs. We're getting mix. From here, the blood is forced with the heartbeat. It's squeezed out to the frog's lungs. There it picks up oxygen and turns red. And when that happens, it returns back to the heart, just like it did for you and I, into the right atrium. But see, we have two ventricles and they don't. So now that blood is forced into the left ventricle. And there is no left ventricle, right? It would normally be there. It's forced into the ventricle and it mixes with oxygen poor blood, hence the purple color. That oxygen kind of mixed blood is then forced out to the body. And so there's some good things and some bad things here. First is that your heart is getting oxygen-rich blood, so it can beat efficiently, but the body never gets really, really, really high oxygenated blood. It gets kind of a mix. And what that means is the body, the muscles in the body, things like that, could actually run out of oxygen a little bit quicker than they did in the fish or than they would in you, okay? So there is a drawback to that. So then what we see in the world of hearts like ours is we start to see a wall form. And you can see this in like turtles, and actually crocodiles have a wall that's almost completely formed, and they just have a hole that actually goes in between the two. And there's not a lot of mixing. That hole can still be found in a lot of human beings today, and it results in different things like could get blood clots, and the results in strokes, but little tiny holes may still even exist in humans today where the wall isn't totally sealed off, okay? But the growing of the wall here between the two ventricles really, really kind of stops the mixing or limits how much blood is mixed. By the time we get to human beings, a lot of us have the wall fully enclosed, and we have circulation that looks like this. Blood that's poor in oxygen comes into the right atrium, gets forced into the right ventricle. From there, it gets pumped, their first heartbeat, out to the lungs where it picks up oxygen and returns nice and oxygen-rich to the heart, giving it, again, nice oxygen-rich blood to the heart. That's forced into the the left ventricle. And from there, it gets the second beat of the boom, boom. The second one will pump that blood out to the body where it can be used up again. That oxygen can be used up again. The benefit? Boy, the heart gets nice oxygen-rich blood, but so does the body. And that's the big benefit here. Now, you and I, we have these style of hearts. Also birds, and birds' hearts generally per body size are way bigger than mammal hearts. And that's because of flight. So flight requires them to just push a massive amount of blood in order to get all that oxygen to the muscles. Flight is so demanding, and we talked about that in the respiration. They need a lot of oxygen and they need a lot of fuel, sugar, and so the heart has to pump all that oxygen and that sugar to those muscles so they can fly, okay? So bird's heart works the same way. It's very efficient. You also notice that birds are also kind of endothermic, or you might use the term warm-blooded like mammals. This is a mammal heart. While reptiles and amphibians and fish are all exothermic, you might know of them as cold-blooded. Recap really quickly. A fish has one atrium and one ventricle. It gets oxygenated or oxygen-rich blood out to the body, but oxygen-rich blood never returns back to the heart. You'll notice the heart is all blue. Frogs have gone one step farther, and they have a three-chambered heart with a right atrium and a left atrium, but just one ventricle. And the problem with that is that oxygen-rich blood never makes its way out to the body. It's always kind of a mix, like kind of oxygenated blood. But oxygen-rich blood does make it back to the heart, which makes the heart beat more efficiently. Now in turtles and crocodilians, they've almost solved this. They still have a little bitty tiny space, so most of the blood that goes out to the body is pretty oxygen rich, but there is some mixing that occurs. We still call this a three-chambered heart because there is still a just third chamber. It just has a wall in the middle of it. And then in human beings and other mammals and also birds, they have a four-chambered heart. So blood comes in from the body, its oxygen pour into the right atrium, just like it did in the other ones. Gets forced into the right ventricle. From there, it gets squeezed on the first heartbeat out to the lungs where it picks up oxygen and turns red. Well, again, for our diagram purposes, it turns red. It goes into the left atrium, okay? And it gets squeezed down into the left ventricle where it gets forced out to the body. The benefits here, the heart gets a nice oxygen-rich blood, and so does the body. So it's kind of the best system as far as the hearts go. Both get oxygen-rich blood, both the heart and the whole body. So those are the types of hearts that I wanted to compare to. In time, what I'd like you to do is head back to classroom, and on the same post there is a Jamboard, and it kind of looks like this. And your job then is to add something to this complicated Venn diagram. Remember where there's a frog, like in the frog circle, these are things that frogs have. In the fish circle, these are things that fish have. And in the human, these are things that humans have. So with the frog, if it's on this part here that's not overlapping anybody, this is unique to a frog or an amphibian or reptile. This is unique to a human, and this part's unique to a fish. The part right here where the frog and the human overlap, that's going to be things that are shared between those two things. Right here, between the fish and the human, or the mammal, that's where those two things are going to share something in common. And then we have one between like the fish and the frog. And then in the middle, you have something where they all share. So something where they all share that it's the same in all of them. Don't just write like blood or they all have a heart. Like those are obvious. But try and look at the notes and the video that we've just talked about. Go back to the pictures, see if you see anything that they all share or that individual share. And that's what these overlapping circles are for. So you can edit it by either like, using a pen and using your finger. I would zoom in so you have like, a big space to write. And then you can go ahead and write in there, write's kind of small. Or you can add a sticky, which is what people did last time. I think that's down here. You can add a sticky note like I did over here. So options are up to you, but if you go and look at the Jamboard and other people will be there and you can't think of anything to add, that's okay too. Just make sure that you go through and you look at what other people have added. You can edit theirs if you want. And then what I'd like you to do is go back to your notes and you can insert what you see on your Venn diagram here on slide number 32. So that's kind of your task today, is maybe participate in the Jamboard, but also add to your notes anything that you see in the Jamboard. Kind of fill out your own Venn diagram so you have it at all times. Guys, enjoy your Wednesday. Thanks for watching my video on comparisons of the heart.